This is episode 1 of the Black Student Athlete Group Alumni Series. We are happy to have our BSAG advisor and former Oberlin student athlete, Chris Donaldson, on to join us for this conversation today. So Chris, thank you for your time. We appreciate it. We're just going to go into a conversation just to get a take of, what your time was like at Oberlin and kind of get a sense of like then versus now as you're now a faculty member at the college too. So let's just start off. Take us through what was Oberlin like for you as a student athlete? Take us through your experience and takeaways, and then kind of give us a sense of how it is now and some of the similarities and differences that you've seen now being back.
Yeah, I just think about the culture, on campus, between, from back when I was a student and the way it is now. And I'd say the biggest thing that I noticed is just communication. The way that we communicated with each other is very different from how the communication is today. The ability to connect with friends and family was much more, I think, intentional back then. I think Kofi, you and I talked about this, I think, in the past. We didn't have cell phones, email was just becoming a thing at the time. We literally had to either call each other's landline and maybe leave a message on the person's answering machine if they had an answering machine. But anything short of that, you just walked to their room and knocked on the door. And if they weren't home, you left a message, on a dry erase board. I mean, it was kind of as simple as that. We could generally count on, meeting with our friends, at the dining hall or at practice. But other than that, it was more kind of like we had to make plans in advance.
Right.
So that's the difference, I think. It's just, the world was I think much slower back then. And much more intentional. Yeah.
You've spoken a bit about the culture and your Oberlin experience, having to go knock on doors, leave messages on whiteboards. What are a few things about that experience that ultimately made you want to come back and have a career here?
I think the biggest thing was, definitely just my history in Oberlin. I grew up in Oberlin. I was the 4th out of 5 generations, to attend Oberlin College in my family. I had members of both sides of my family that either attended Oberlin or worked here at the college, which included my grandfather, who was an art professor here for almost 40 years. And then on the other side of my family, I had a great-grandfather who was one of the maintenance people in Johnson House. He used to bring coal in and heat the furnace, when it was on those cold nights, so that was his job. So, Oberlin has just it's been in my blood. It's been in my family, for my whole life and far beyond that. I have to say that I wasn't necessarily looking to work at Oberlin after graduation. I had met my future wife during the time that I was off, and she's also an Oberlin grad. And I think at that time we were just trying to figure out, how we were going to make our lives together work. But an opportunity became available with the Upward Bound program. And I started working here, a couple months after graduation. And then, I was there for about 6 years, and then we lost our funding. And, as luck would have it, a few months later, a position opened up in student academic services, and I was offered the job. So it kind of happened for me, I think maybe a little more organically, because I really was one of those kids that just did not really know, what my next step was in life, when I was a student here. And I kind of struggled with that. But I think it's important to share that, I wouldn't be working here today at Oberlin, if it weren't for the people that went to bat for me, and when those opportunities, came about. And I took pride in the relationships that I had built with people, back then. And these are people that I'm still in touch with today. So I guess just a piece of advice, as students, take advantage of the resources here, get to know as many people as you can, but also get those, have those people get to know you as well.
You spoke to a lot of what makes you who you are. And I think I love that. You also mentioned, having a lot of resources. And I think that leads us perfectly into our next question of you grew up in Oberlin, all these people here supporting you, and you made them proud by going out and getting something like the Moses Fleetwood Walker Award.
Yeah.
And I was hoping you could speak to more of what that is, kind of the history behind that, and what were your emotions when receiving the award? Because there's a lot of people on campus that still don't they still aren't fully aware of what this is.
Yeah, that was huge for me. In fact, that was probably the biggest award that I had gotten up until that point in my life. The Moses Cleaver Walker Award is presented yearly to a minority college or high school student who has had success on the baseball field in the classroom. And so I was the first annual recipient of the award after my last baseball season at Oberlin. And you gotta, I guess to put it into context, baseball was everything for me. I was trying to actually become a professional baseball player. One of my teammates, Chip Winarski, was actually drafted from Oberlin.
Oh, wow.
One of the pitchers, as a pitcher, drafted by the Cleveland Indians. And get this, he made it up to Double-A, and he played with Michael Jordan when Michael Jordan was his little stint in baseball. Chip played with Michael Jordan for a couple of years, or for at least a year.
That. Yeah, wow.
So, but I was trying to follow that path, right? I thought that I had a chance too. So to get an award like this was big for me. So just a little known fact about, Moses Fleetwood Walker. He was the first Black Major League Baseball player. And he played for the Toledo team in the American Association in the mid 1800s. And that was long before Jackie Robinson, who is still believed to be the most, to have, broken the color barrier in 1948. But Moses Fleetwood Walker was an Oberlin graduate in the 1880s, and he was a barehanded catcher. So get that. I mean, imagine that. Even if the balls weren't the same, didn't have the same density or whatever, catching with your bare hand, I could not even imagine that. And they used to play their games in Tappan Square. So, the baseball field, we know where the baseball field is now, but it used to be in Tappan Square.
Kind of the transition a little bit. Like we mentioned earlier, you are now the advisor of the Black Student Athlete Group.
Yeah.
And, for one, we wanted to just get your take on what made you want to step into this role, take this upon yourself, given everything else that you're already doing at the college. But then along with that, sort of what excites you about the group? And what are some things that you also hope to see come out of it? Also being a former student athlete here at Oberlin yourself.
Right. Okay. All right. So it was about a year ago, I guess, that I was contacted by, one of the founders, Devin White, who you guys know. And, Devin had all these wonderful ideas, about starting this new group and utilizing the Black alumni base, in a variety of ways. And as someone who's always had a passion for working with especially underrepresented, student athletes, I was very interested in supporting the idea. And I remember, the discussions, barely getting off the ground. And then COVID hit last month. And students were sent home, and Devin ended up graduating, and there was no indication if this idea would ever really materialize. And by that time, I had gotten to know this kid named Kofi pretty well.
Scott.
who along with a couple of other students decided to take on this project. So I'm honored to be working with the BSAG group and fully embrace and support the mission. I have to say that I'm in awe, with what BSAG has been able to accomplish, since last spring, especially during a COVID year. And I don't want that to get lost in this conversation. This has been one of the more challenging years, I think, for all of us. And I'm excited to continue working, with such a driven group of students like you and Kobe and Malika and the others. You guys have already made, such an impact, on both the current and prospective students. And, you kind of give, the Black alumni an opportunity now to re-engage, with the school in ways that we've never done before. So, so as a Black alumni, I really appreciate that. And I really appreciate how you guys are, bringing us up again, to the forefront. It's really exciting.
Yeah, no, for real. And I guess to kind of close up our conversation here, if you could give any advice, a piece of advice to, a current Black student athlete, a future Black student athlete in college, from your own experience, what would you tell them, or what advice would you give them?
Yeah. I would say, get to know your support systems at Oberlin College and take advantage of them. There's so many students here that don't really get a chance to get to know what those are until sometimes it's too late. So And, there's some amazing people that work here at Oberlin, and each have their own stories to tell, and all are, passionate about helping others. Get to know your coaches, I'd say, your peers, your professors and staff. And I'd say most importantly is have them get to know you, right? Allow for those conversations to happen, where you're not just getting to know them, but they're getting to know you as well, because that's important. Be kind, because you never know how much that's going to mean to someone, given, in that moment, and how much of an impact that might have on someone.
Thank you for your time today. I would definitely say you offered great advice. You took us through your experience and what made it special. And I definitely think you set a high bar for what this series has come to be. And we are definitely a pleasure to have you as our advisor, and really excited to see where this group can go, even past our time.
Well, I think, and I said, well, first of all, thank you guys, so much for having me. I think as you continue to talk to the alumni, that bar is just going to get higher and higher. So